And then
Judy, will you please pin the interpreter?
I believe you are, but let me just double check.
It got bounced off.
Okay. There, I think you're good. All right. So again, this is going to be about a 1 hour session. We want to just make sure that we're respectful of everybody's time. It's going to be an overview of the process that we'll be going through tonight that are based on the questions that everyone submitted ahead of time. But I thought just before we get started, I'm going to launch a poll and ask you to tell us what schools your children attend. And I'm going to launch that right now. And then we can get a feel for who's in our audience this evening. So if you just take a minute to tell us where your children attend school. Okay, yeah, just about everybody having submitted a response. We'll give you a couple more seconds. All right, so let me just share the results, and you can now see that you know, we have about 8% of our population here tonight is from AEL, 34% from Discovery School at Four Corners, 16% from Federal Street, 10% from Newton, 25% from Greenfield Middle, and 34% from Greenfield High School. So we're glad to have you with us, and it's a good cross section of the district, and we're just pleased to be able to do that. So I want to just introduce our panelists to you this evening, which is our school administration. And I'll start with Principal Patnode at Greenfield High School. I don't know, Principal Patnode, if you want to just unmute and say hello.
Good evening, everyone. I'm Karen Patnode. I'm the principal at the high school. Thank you for having me and happy to be here.
And Principal at Greenfield Middle School, Lynn Dole. Lynn, if you want to just say hello.
Good evening. It's a pleasure to be here.
Melody Goodwin, who's the principal at Newton School. If you want to say hello.
I don't think my video is working.
It is. I can see you.
Okay. Well, thank you for joining us tonight. I think this is an important topic for all of us to discuss.
And Principal Casey Putnam from Discovery Four Corners.
Good evening, everybody. Thank you for being here.
And last but not least, or not last but not least, but the last of our elementary schools anyway, Michelle Fenneman from Federal Street School.
Hi, everyone. I'm Michelle Fenimore, the principal at Federal Street School. Thank you all for joining us.
And our principal from the Academy of Early Learning, Nancy Putnam. You want to just say hello?
Hi, everyone, and welcome to this webinar tonight. I'm happy to be joining all of you at this time.
And the last person I want to introduce is our moderator for this evening, Justin Martin. Justin, if you want to introduce yourself. Justin, and there you are. Oh, are you muted? I can't hear you.
I'm not muted.
Oh,
Hello,
there
everyone.
you go. So Justin's going to moderate.
And Interim Superintendent Poole, I was told that I'm not able to be seen. So can you fix the pinning so I can be seen?
All right, let me see if I can work that out. Okay, let me try that. All right, let's see if that works. I think that may work for you. All right, so Justin's going to serve as our moderator this evening. So Justin, I'll turn it over to you.
Sure. Good evening, everyone. Again, my name is Justin Martin. I'm the Senior Vice President and Chief Strategy Officer for TMS. We're an education management consulting firm that's currently working with the Greenfield Public Schools. My role tonight is to serve as a facilitator of this public forum on the reopening of schools. And in doing so, it's my goal to get us through as many questions as possible, have those questions answered by the appropriate educational leader, be it the principal or the superintendent, and do so in an efficient and timely manner. We collected more than 100 questions from parents and community members in less than 24 hours in advance of this meeting. I've taken all of those questions and culled them down to about 15 questions that summarize what most people have been asking in terms of general concerns from the community. We'll also be publishing on our website in the next few days a list of these same frequently asked questions from tonight's forum and also the forum scheduled for tomorrow afternoon. If there are any additional questions that aren't answered tonight, feel free certainly to email us. I believe most of you have Dr. Houle's email address or the principal of your own school, and they will forward them on to Dr. Houle and myself, and we'll get the answers out as quickly as we can. So without further delay, we'll get started. I broke down these questions into several categories. So the categories from all the questions we received focused on remote learning, obviously, transportation, meals and free time and what that looks like, classrooms, COVID concerns, and last but not least, MCAS. And so the first couple of questions I'll point towards the superintendent, Dr. Houle, because they are more of the larger issues that the district as a whole are facing. One of those questions that's come up often is it mandatory for my child to come back to school? Dr. Houle, I'll point that question to you.
Sure. Just to give you a little background on why we are where we are right now, on March 5th, the State Board of Elementary and Secondary Education approved a plan that was put out by the Commissioner of Education that on April 5th, all elementary school students in Massachusetts would return to full-time in-person learning. On April 28th, all middle school students would return to school full-time in person, and at a later date to be determined, high school students would return to school for full-time in person. So our response to his requests for moving us forward was to, first of all, get a waiver, because the original guidance was that children in grades pre-K through 5 would come in on April 5th. And since our 5th graders are really part of our middle school, we were given a waiver and approved to postpone 5th graders to come in on the middle school date so that they're coming with their peers into that building. And then for the high school, we're going to have them return on April 28th along with the middle school, because the 8th grade is at Greenfield High School. And so we just figured that rather than have one grade come in, not all the rest, that we would just have everyone come in, and we believe that's feasible and doable. Under the commissioner's plan, parents and caregivers do have the opportunity to choose to remain in remote learning mode for the remainder of this school year if you desire. That is not something that will carry forward into next year. That is something for this school year. So parents will have that option, parents and caregivers, to be able to remain in remote learning mode for the remainder of the school year.
Great. So one of the other questions that came up quite a bit often was the question of how do we ensure that the education of students who remain remote won't be compromised by a teacher's split attention between those that he or she is teaching in class and remote students following at home. How will that look, or what will that look like?
It'll look very similar to what it looks like now in remote learning. It is a case where, well, teachers will be sort of doing some simultaneous teaching. There will be points in the day when it will be a synchronous lesson so that remote students don't feel further isolated from their classmates, but that they can interact with their classmates who are in the building. And then there'll be times of asynchronous learning so that the teacher has an assignment that has to be done during class time by the students who are sitting in front of him or her. And then the students who are remote, the synchronous lesson will end, and then they'll be working on their assignments from home. So that's basically how that's going to work.
Great. And, one of the other questions that came up is that if parents and guardians send their school back into in-person, but they feel too overwhelmed, can they switch back to remote?
Yes, they can. That's an easier process than going from remote back to in-person. So that we want parents to be cognizant of the fact that when a child steps into remote, or you've chosen remote out of the gate, we are setting up our classrooms and our entire school environment based on the number of students we anticipate will be joining us. The commissioner has said in his guidance that it would take about 4 to 6 weeks if somebody decided they wanted to come from remote back into in-person, because of all of the logistical things about putting, extra desk and chair in a classroom and having to rearrange the classroom, rearrange other learning spaces, transportation needs, all of those kinds of things. We believe we can do it on the shorter side of that time at 4 weeks. So parents just need to be mindful of the fact that if a decision is made to come back into in-person learning, that it's not something we can do just immediately. We do need some lead time for that. But if somebody decides they want to step into remote, it's just basically notifying the principal, and that can happen.
Great. And then 2 more questions from along these same lines. That will kids have the same teacher if they choose to keep them home for the remainder of the school year, or will that switch somehow?
That's something we don't really know yet. And the reason why we don't know it is you're going to be getting a follow-up survey in later on this week to really make a commitment around in-person or remote learning. So depending on the numbers and how teachers may have to shift, that will depend on whether or not a child can keep their same teacher if they choose to stay remote. We're going to do our best to try and do that, but we can't guarantee that.
And along those lines, one of the questions that came up often in the last day or two was from parents concerned about student anxieties and fears in returning to school. Certainly everybody has still had some stress or anxiety, parents and kids alike. But what is the district doing to handle students who come back to school and they're anxious or stressed or fearful about everything that's going on?
We have counselors on staff who are able to work with our students and be able to help them navigate some of those anxieties. We're putting some systems in place in terms of how students re-enter school so that they can do it in a way that is safe and get them into small groups immediately to be able to make sure that the atmosphere is not overwhelming in large group settings. It also helps us to keep the protocols that we need to keep around physical distancing in place. So, and a little later on in the presentation, I'll show you some of the things that teachers and principals have been doing to prepare for students' arrival to make it feel welcoming and as comfortable as we possibly can.
Great. And then, so we'll switch to the next section of questions now under transportation and transportation concerns from parents and guardians. One thing that a lot of parents and guardians want to know is the drop-off and pickup guidelines. And many had said they were already complicated pre-COVID. So now what is it going to look like? And along those same lines, can parents pick up in person? Can different adults pick up on specific days? What's the process if someone else needs to pick up your child at the last minute? Will pickup times be staggered and separated by grade level? And then lastly, which we ask, I know I ask this question every fall, is where can I find my bus schedule?
So let me just start by talking about the buses. And as you can see on this slide, we have some photos of our buses. We have 2 vendors, Kuzmeskis, who does our regular education transportation, and then we have our own buses and drivers for our special needs populations. As you can see at the top of the screen, just grab this real quick right here. This is the inside of a Kuzmeskis bus. You can see that the windows will be cracked every other window to allow for circulation. Students will be required to wear masks. only 2 to a bench. There will be assigned seating so we can keep, again, all the things with contact tracing that needs to be done. The same thing will happen on our special needs buses. As you can see down here, here's one of our special needs buses with windows open, masking, and all of those things. Buses will be cleaned in between runs, and they will be fully sanitized with a hydroelectric sprayer at the end of the day. And it's a little bit difficult because of the shading here, but this is one of our own Greenfield bus drivers holding his electrostatic sprayer that he'll be using to spray down the bus on a daily basis.
Dr. Hull, I wonder if it'd be helpful then to switch now to ask the elementary school principals to talk about their bus routines. Would that be a good time to shift?
Sure.
So if I can, I'll call on each of the principals and have you kind of talk us through in brief terms what your transportation what your bus pickup is going to look like. So we'll start with Ms. Putnam Principal Putnam at Four Corners.
So at the Discovery School, we have decided that the buses will be using the upper lot off Bernardston Road for arrival and dismissal. We're still working on many of the details for car drop off and pickup and walkers, trying to figure out entrances and exits. And as soon as I have more details about that, I will be sure to share it with you. Thank you.
Thanks. Principal Goodwin?
At Newton School, the pickup and drop off will be the same. For kindergarten parents, you enter Newton through the lower parking lot, and the line starts in our lower parking lot. It may take us a little longer, but I'm sure we'll get faster. There were a couple of questions about notes. Bus drivers and schools like a handwritten note to come in with the child if somebody else is going to be picking up your child. And please put a first and second name because we don't know who Ed is, if Ed is picking up your child. And if you have a last minute change, which we know life happens and sometimes parents have to get somebody to pick up at the last minute, please call at least 15 minutes before dismissal, which would be about 2:30. After 2:30, there's a lot of children going different places. It's very confusing. We do the best we can, but we do ask at 2:30. One of the major changes at Newton School is parents must remain in their cars. You can't be waiting outside. You can't come inside. You're going to need to use a telephone. In the past, we've had parents wait in a lot in our lobby or outside our front doors. That is impossible to maintain social distancing. You're going to have to remain in your cars. If you want to pick up your child, you can line up at appropriately social distance places down on the grass on the road, but you cannot come up to the doors because of the number of people who have to come out of those doors. So thank you for your cooperation in advance. It's going to take extra time, but it's going to be worth it to make sure everybody is safe.
Thanks for that. And Principal Fenimore?
So at Federal Street School, for our kiddos who are arriving on a bus, they will use the Franklin Street gate at the back of the school, and they'll come through that gate, and school staff will be available to send them in the correct direction and help them find their way. If they are arriving via a parent vehicle or a guardian vehicle or a walker, we have another system where they will come in the front driveway, and we'll have signage and different ways to help parents navigate that drop-off process, and school staff as well to help that. We do want to emphasize that our parents and guardians do have to stay in the vehicles during this time. For dismissal, it's a SWAT at Federal Street School, so our kiddos who are taking the bus will get the bus on the front of the school, the driveway, and then our parent pickup kiddos will go to the back on the Franklin Street side of the school. And we certainly have more details, and as the principal, I will be sending that out to all of our Federal Street School families.
Thank you. And what about at the middle school, Principal Dole?
Good evening. At Greenfield Middle School, our family drop-off will be at Sanderson Street as it has been this past year. I'll look forward to seeing families again. And our students will all be entering through the Sanderson Street entrance. The buses will be coming through the parking lot as they did last time, so that there'll be a lot of continuity at Greenfield Middle School.
Great, thank you. And lastly, at the high school, Principal Patnod.
Hi, everyone. We're going to be using the event entrance for bus drop-off as we have in the past, but we're also going to use it for parent drop-off as well. You'll enter on Kent Avenue, and it'll be one way around the back of the building towards the event entrance. The inner 2 lanes will be for buses. The outer 2 lanes will be for parent drop-off, and students will enter through the event entrance. And we'll have definitely a map and more details to follow.
Thank you for that. There's a couple other questions that parents have come up with that are curious, especially if they're not going to take the bus, if they're going to drop off their kids themselves. Several parents have said, what leeway will be offered? It's going to, one parent wrote in and said, if I have 2 kids at 2 different sites, it's impossible for me to drop them off at the same time. Will there be leeway? Will my child be penalized for being, a few minutes late in that sense? Dr. Houle, I guess I'd point this question to you.
Sure. Before I answer that, I just thought that we'd also ask Nancy Putnam, the principal of the Academy of Early Learning, just to talk about pickup and drop off there before we move on.
Thank you. I always seem to be the last one on these conversations. As everyone's already heard, we have the same protocols we're going with. Parents cannot get out of their car. We cannot have a central meeting place for everyone. So at AEL, each of the classrooms are using different entrances. School staff will be there as you unload from your car, and will guide the children to all of these other new entrances, such as the gym, exterior classroom doors. We've got 2 side doors and 2 classes that will come through the portico. Our bus will just do the same as it's been doing, just drop off, and will also be met by school staff. It's important to recognize that we will not open until 8:30. I believe in the past, it's been 8:25 where we started to bring the children in. It will be 8:30, excuse me, and dismissal will be 2:55 with 2 half-day sessions and 2 full-day classes. Thank you.
Thanks, Nancy. And great segue into the hours of operation. This slide outlines what the hours of operation will be at each of the schools. We unfortunately are not going to be able to accommodate parents dropping off their students ahead of time. We have to be mindful of our contractual obligations to our teachers and giving them the time that they need to get into the school in the morning and get themselves set for the day. So in the past, I know that students have had some recess time at the elementary levels before coming into the building, and there's been some lead time at both Greenfield Middle and Greenfield High School. So things will be a little bit different because of those contractual obligations and giving teachers a chance to get started on their day, and also to make sure that we're following all of the protocols that we need to follow that have been set for us by the Massachusetts Department of Public Health, as well as the Massachusetts Department of Elementary and Secondary Education. So as you can see, all of our elementary schools are going to run from 8:30 to 2:55. We do understand that some of you have children at more than one school. The pickup and drop off is going to be a process at each of the schools. Because of getting buses in and getting the children right into school immediately. So if you're dropping your child off at one school and you're a few minutes late getting to the next school, it shouldn't be really a problem. That'll be, somebody will be there to greet your child and make sure that your child gets off to the proper place. But it's unfortunate that, we are in the situation that we're in with the pandemic. And even though there is hope ahead of us. We understand that we also need to continue to be strict about protocols so that everybody is safe.
Thanks, Dr. Houle. The next section that we've broken out into is parents and a few students had questions about breakfast, lunch, snack time, free time, mask breaks, and so forth. So the larger question that came in from many people was asking us to explain the breakfast and lunch process. And will there still be a menu to anticipate choices? Will it just be grab and go food? Will it just be cold food? And will students eat in the cafeteria or the classroom? So Dr. Houle, how will that work, or what's the setup there?
Basically, it'll be a grab and go situation, and depending on the school, and each of the principals can certainly speak to their own schools in a couple of minutes, but we will offer grab and go. There will be a combination of both hot and cold choices. I know that schools send this out via newsletters, but I also wanted to just show you where you could easily find a menu. And that is if you go to our website, which is gpsk12.org, and you'll see on the main page, I've circled it, there's the departments. You click on that, and I'm going to do that right now. And if you click on departments, you can see food services. If you click on food services again, it takes you to their page, and there are menus so that you can see. Some days will be cold options, some days will be hot options. Our food service staff is working very hard to make sure that there's a good variety for students to have at their access every single day.
Great, thanks, Dr. Houle. And along those lines, will students be eating in their cafeteria or in their classrooms? How will that work?
Why don't we start with Nancy Putnam at Academy of Early Learning. We'll let you go first, Nancy, and why don't you tell us a little bit about how lunch will happen at AEL?
Sure. Right now, we have 2 full-day classes, and so they will be eating in our cafeteria. Tables have been separated, and we have plexiglass barriers on each table so that it seats 4 children to a table within the safety protocols that we have been required. At this time, I'm not really sure about the bag lunch for the half-day children. I'm assuming that will continue as it's been all this year.
Thank you for
Thanks.
that. And Principal Fenimore?
At Federal Street School, we will have our kindergarten and first grade students eat in the classroom, and that will be a grab and go option. And then our grades 2 through 4 will eat in the cafeteria, and all of the spaces that they are eating at are 6 feet apart. In the cafeteria, there are desks, and they are 6 feet apart. So we are hoping that that will be a nice little change of pace for our older kiddos.
Thank you. Principal Goodwin?
At Newton School, we'll continue our breakfast in the classroom program, and we will also have lunch in the classroom. But many of our teachers are planning on picnics outside when the weather is nice, just to enjoy the fresh air and be outside and use the picnic tables that have been placed on our playground. Our PTO just also donated nice lawn chairs for the kids to enjoy the outdoors.
Oh, that's terrific. Principal Putnam?
The other Putnam.
I am. So at Discovery School, it's our intention for the students to eat in their classroom whenever possible, as long as the numbers allow us to do so. And similar to Newton School, our PTO has purchased some nice folding camp chairs for all of our students to allow outdoor eating as much as possible, and picnics as long as it's not too muddy, but they'll have the chairs as an option for those days where the ground may be a little wet, and we're looking forward to eating outside in the beautiful weather.
Thanks for that. What about at the middle and the high school? Principal Dole?
Yes, at Greenfield Middle School, we're very proud to be hosting the extraordinary production system of the Greenfield Public Schools Food Service Department that has already prepared 500,000 meals. And distributed them to young people in our town. So our cafeteria is right now an assembly line for food production. So when we return to school in April, our students will be eating lunch in the gym at socially distanced tables and desks, and they'll have breakfast and lunch in the gym, which is now set up as a socially distanced cafeteria space.
Oh, that sounds terrific. And what about at the high school, Principal Patnod?
At the high school, we will be doing grab and go breakfast in the cafeteria and the gymnasium. If there's a need for overflow, some classroom spaces will be used. And at lunch, we will be using the cafeteria and the gymnasium for 2 separate lunch times.
Thanks. Along those same lines, several parents and a few students emailed us with the question about what will recess look like or break time, and will they be able to hang out with their friends between classes, or they just be, quote, stuck in my class all day, end of quote.
Sure. There are, by regulations and also by our desire, there'll be 2 mask breaks built into the school day so that students will have the opportunity to take their mask off, physically distanced according to the guidelines that we will be following. Weather permitting, we want those to be outdoors as much as possible, so that way the students have a chance to just get a little fresh air so that they're not at their desks all day long. I do know that one of the other questions people were asking about was access to water, access to bathrooms. Obviously, bathrooms will be accessed. They will be cleaned and sanitized throughout the day. We're working on either helping with bottles for water or having bottled water available. But if you want to have your child bring water with them to school, they certainly can in a bottle. And just to back up a little bit on the food thing, one thing I neglected to mention is that if a parent chooses to send lunch to school with your child, that's fine. We just ask that you be mindful of the fact that we do have students with allergies. So if we can avoid things like peanut butter and other things that could cause a problem with a child, that would be really helpful, and we would really appreciate that. We're going to use the outdoors as much as we can as an access for teaching and physical activities with all protocols in place. And like my friend Kermit on the slide, masks will be worn in those situations as well. So we will have opportunities for breaks, opportunities to enjoy the out of doors while we do some of those kinds of activities. And if there's outdoor teaching going on, we're working with the town to make sure that we have Wi-Fi access outside the building so that teachers can access Wi-Fi for those students who may be learning remotely, but could at least participate in a synchronous lesson if it's taking place out of doors.
Thanks for that, Dr. Houle. Now we've got to switch into another subsection here of questions. Many parents and guardians had questions about classrooms and specifically what they're going to look like. So will there be an opportunity to tour classrooms before school starts and students return?
As you can imagine, we are in the throes of getting furniture moved and getting things set up. So there would not be the ability for an in-person tour, but we should have, hopefully by tomorrow or by the end of the week at the latest, a virtual tour. We had a videographer come in and spend some time in each of the buildings so that you can really see a virtual tour of what the buildings will look like. These are some pictures that I took while the videographer was with us in some of the various schools, and you can see how the desks have been set out. These are by the protocols that we are required to follow, with all students facing forward. We will have 6 feet of distance between people. That does not necessarily always translate to 6 feet of distance between desks, but we will not go any lower than 3 feet between desks. And in most cases, we can get to 6 feet between people and have a little more than 3 feet between desks. So this is pretty much what the classroom setup will look like. These were some classrooms that had already been started to be set up so that you could see them. We're working on supervision plans to make sure that there's distancing followed in the hallways as well as we navigate through this part of the process.
Thanks, Dr. Houle. One of the questions I had for our high school principal, Principal Patnaud, is several parents asked, how will a high school, and they've also included the middle school in this as well, but how will the high school students be monitored to ensure that they're not having physical contact or not slacking off with the rules of wearing a mask and staying 6 feet apart and those sorts of things? What is the high school doing along those lines?
Sure. Well, we always do our best to keep our kids safe, no matter if it's a pandemic or not. Right now, we have one-way hallways in place so that folks can travel the same direction on each side of the hallway to avoid cross traffic patterns. We also will minimize which bathrooms are open throughout the day and have hall monitors who will be monitoring, for contact tracing purposes as well, who enters and exits bathrooms. We also will have our building monitor along with administration continually walking through the hallways throughout the day and just reminding students of the daily 4 that we are really trying to instill in folks to stay socially distant and be safe with one another. And we'll certainly be on top of that throughout the school day.
Thank you for that. And I imagine at the middle school, it's a similar process, Principal Dole?
It is indeed. I appreciate what Principal Patnaud had said, and it's going to be very similar in the middle school setting.
Thank you. One of the other questions that came up about classroom settings and classroom environments is several parents asked will the learning platforms daily remain the same? Will I still be submitting work online? Will remote learners still be on Google Meets while others are in the classroom? And what will happen with remote learners if there's outdoor in-person instruction? How will remote learners continue to be part of those classes?
Mm-hmm. So we'll still be using the Google Classroom environment for students to submit work during the synchronous lessons where there may be some simultaneous teaching going on. Students who are in the classroom will not necessarily need to be on their laptops because our classrooms all have projectors and screens. So there's an opportunity to engage and interact between students at home and students in the classroom. But again, we'll begin continuing that sort of methodology of using the Google Classroom environment to submit assignments, just to make sure that it's fair and equitable for everybody as they're working through. Also to just decrease the amount of contact that would be happening within the school environment so that papers aren't being passed out and we can still maintain physical distancing as we need to. So there'll be a combination of the two things. And as I mentioned earlier, when students are outside for classes, we have some Wi-Fi access outside of the buildings. And we're just making sure that those Wi-Fi access points are going to be viable and ready to go. And we've been working with the town on that. And it looks like we have a good plan in place to make sure that that's ready to go when students come back to school.
Terrific. I was going to switch now to some of the COVID concerns that are still in our community and really everywhere. But one of the first questions that was often asked is, what will daily cleaning look like in the classrooms? And along those same lines, what will air circulation look like? And will teachers have soap and sanitizers and tissues and disinfectant wipes and other things that they'll need?
Sure. So daily cleaning is going to be sort of kind of a group effort. There will be wipes available in classrooms for individuals to wipe their own spaces down. Hand sanitizer will be available in the school. We have both small units for in classrooms as well as freestanding units out in the hallways that have larger capacity. So there'll be plenty of opportunities for hand sanitizing. The picture you see in the upper left-hand corner of this particular slide is one of our air purifiers. in any classroom that looks like it had, we've done a full engineering study of the air exchange in the schools and done a great deal of work on our heating and ventilation systems. But where the air exchange does not quite meet the standard of 6 changes per hour, we are installing air purifier units similar to the one that you see. They have HEPA filters in them so that they are able to filter out anything that is airborne and capture it so that it won't be spread throughout the classroom or the school. In addition, according to the guidelines from the Department of Elementary and Secondary Education, teachers will be opening windows to keep that airflow moving. So we'll have a lot of different opportunities for doing that. On the right-hand side of your screen, you can see our floor stickers. And as Principal Patno mentioned, everybody's mapped out how the traffic will occur in their hallways. So depending on the school, you'll see a floor sticker, which is a reminder to students about how far apart to be. And they're all the way down all of our hallways. Somebody also I know was concerned about COVID-19 vaccines. As you know, those have been made available to all educators and staff who work with children. The city of Greenfield and the Franklin County Council of Governments has really been very helpful in trying to get access to vaccines. And so our staff are working through that process, getting their appointments and being vaccinated as we move forward. So those are some of the big strategies that we're really taking a look at in terms of making sure that the school environment is safe and clean for all.
Great. Dr. Houle, one more question along those lines is that's come up was, given the desire to keep sick or ill students home, even if it's precautionary, will those students still have the option to attend school remotely for that day or those days so they don't fall behind?
That's a great question. And in those short-term instances where a child is not feeling well, we certainly want to encourage parents not to have children attend school, but if they are feeling well enough to participate remotely, absolutely, we'd love to have them do that, which kind of brings us to the Daily 4 that was mentioned earlier. If you're around our schools, you're going to see these signs up everywhere where we're trying to remind everyone who enters our school environment of the need to wear a mask, to wash hands and use hand sanitizer, to make sure that they're staying apart. And again, to stay home if you don't feel well. And one of the things that we're asking parents to do, and the state is asking parents to do, is to do a symptom check of your child on a daily basis. And here is the list of things you should be looking for. You know, if they have fever or chills, they have a cough that's new, some shortness of breath, new fatigue, new headaches, new loss of taste or smell, or a new sore throat, congestion or a runny nose, feeling nauseous or having diarrhea, that we're asking parents to please check for those on a daily basis. And if your child is exhibiting those symptoms, to please keep your child home. Our nurses have put together a great deal of information to help you with some of these aspects of the return to in-person learning that I'll be sharing within the next couple of days. And one of those will be a sign-off sheet that will explain what the symptom check is, and that we're asking parents to sign to say that you'll partner with us and check for these symptoms during the day, each day.
Thanks for that, Dr. Houle. And, you know, switching to the final category here for us is one that comes up even when we weren't in COVID times, and that's MCAS testing. A number of parents have expressed concern and asked if students will still be taking MCAS and how that will work, and can they opt out?
Mm-hmm. Before I get to MCAS, I want to talk just about a couple of other things with regard to what we're doing to keep students safe. Many of you have already received this letter, but it will be in the packet of information in case you did not. We are participating in a program called pooled testing. And basically how it works is that it's a way to test inexpensively for prevalence of COVID in the environment. So each child will be swabbing their nose. They will put their swabs into a collective pool of samples and then go about their day. That pool gets tested at a lab. The pooled results come back. If everything is negative, then it's all good. If it is not, then we test individually if there has been a positive result, so we can narrow down who the positive result is. If that child happens to be in school during the day, we have a medical waiting room that they can be in, so they can be isolated from their peers until a parent can come pick them up. And then there will be contact tracing for anybody who might have had contact with a student or a staff member who tested positive, and directions about how to deal with that. So, you know, again, that's something that you can certainly opt out of if you're not comfortable with that, but we are encouraging that to happen. Pool testing will be available a couple of times a week. It will actually happen only once a week. I did mine yesterday. It was pretty simple. And I actually have a little friend who can tell us a little more about pool testing, and I think you'll kind of enjoy this.
Today I'm going to show you how to do a nasal swab. Step 1. Hand sanitize your hands. Step 2. Take out the nasal swab. Don't touch the side that you are gonna put up your nose. Step 3. Take the swab and put it in your nose and spin it around 4 times. Then do the same thing in your other nostril. Last step, drop it boogers down into the tube. You're done.
Whoops, let's move on here. So we can go to MCAS testing. We just, one of our teachers actually found this video online, so we really appreciate that being shared with us. And sometimes it's easier to hear from a child about how you can do something than to hear from the adults. So we'll be sharing that with the children as well to make that comfortable. So to move on to MCAS testing, there are 2 hurdles that we have to overcome. One is at the state level on Beacon Hill. MCAS testing is part of law in Massachusetts, particularly for 10th graders as a graduation requirement. So that's the first hurdle that has to be overcome. And then the second hurdle that has to be overcome is to get a waiver from the Federal Education Department to be able to not administer MCAS testing. Unfortunately, Massachusetts is on what they call a no opt-out state. So parents don't have that option to opt out of the testing. There are several organizations that are working on trying to convince both the state and the federal government to have a moratorium on testing for this year. The Massachusetts Association of School Superintendents, we have put out some pretty strong statements. School committees across the Commonwealth, including our own Greenfield School Committee, have made a statement that they do not believe that MCAS should be done this year. The Massachusetts Teachers Association is on board with this. The Principals Association is on board with this. And there's a lot of pressure that's being put on both our state legislators as well as the federal government to suspend MCAS for the year. We don't believe it will be a good measure of learning for the year. And because school districts across Massachusetts have been educating children in different kinds of ways. We don't believe it's going to yield good data that we can use to help inform instruction. And with school districts, including ours, that do a lot of local assessments, we're keeping track of where our students are at and monitoring their progress through learning. And we believe that that's a better, more equitable measure of student learning than a state test right now.
Thanks for that, Dr. Houle. Well, we're right at about 8:25, so I'll turn it over to you for some closing remarks and next steps and what parents can expect in the coming weeks.
Sure, thanks. So again, one of the things that we're asking families to work with us on is to, particularly with older students, to really stress personal responsibilities, that this is the key to success, making those good decisions about following guidelines outside of school and being masked and staying physically distant no matter where you are. I know that the governor has relaxed the travel order to a travel advisory upon return to Massachusetts. But again, we're asking everyone to please be mindful with April vacation coming. I know everybody is anxious to get out and about, but we're just, again, asking people to please be mindful of where you might be thinking about traveling and what the consequences could be of that travel. Upon return in April. So we just really are asking people to just work with us on that and to be thinking carefully about that. And again, those personal precautions that daily for doing those things at home is critical to our success here in school. So as we welcome everyone back, I want you to know that teachers and administrators have been not only doing the physical work to make sure we comply with regulations, but we're also doing some things to make sure that our students feel welcome in our buildings. I've been in all of the schools. I'm beginning to see some bulletin boards go up that are welcoming students back. You can see in the upper left-hand corner, one teacher has actually stenciled a stool that a child will be sitting on to remind our students that they are smart, that they are unique, and that they're the wonderful people that we know they are. At Federal Street School on the right-hand side, I walked past a bulletin board the other day, and there's a giant taco that is 6 feet wide to remind students to say 6 feet apart. So we're trying to do some things that in the context that we're in, of just trying to help our students feel welcome and as safe as possible coming back to school. So the next steps in all of this is that there will be a follow-up survey that will go out by week's end, and we're going to ask you to identify yourself as a family, where your children go to school, and what your intentions are with regard to remote versus in-person learning. We hope that this session has been helpful to you and your ability to help make that decision. We want you to make an informed decision. We will have frequent updates on our website. And if you haven't been there, again, it's gpsk12.org. And right on the front page is an interim superintendent's update. And I try to update this at least once a week. It will probably become more frequent over the next week or so. But if you go right to the front page, you'll see some updates on things that are happening. And so those will be posted quite frequently. And you'll get messages through the school messenger system about that. So again, make sure that if you have access to the parent portal in PowerSchool, that your email is correct. And if you're not quite sure how to do that, call your child's school. If you haven't been receiving my school messenger messages, do please make sure that you call your child's school and check that that email is correct. And again, I just can't say enough about the administration and the staff who have worked diligently over the past 3 weeks to iron out all of the details in our plans. I am extremely grateful to Kuzmeskis for their willingness to adjust their transportation schedules to meet our needs. It's been a collaborative team effort, and everybody wants to make sure that our students and staff feel welcome and safe. We have community partners who are working with us, the Greenfield Board of Health and others. And to all of you, our families, or really helping us to work through what is a very difficult time for all. And we understand that this is not necessarily the way we want things to be, but this is the way that we're trying to work through what it is that we're being required to do. So again, we thank you all for your time and your energy this evening. And I think that pretty much wraps us up for the night. Justin, I don't know if you wanted to say anything else before we sign off.
Nope, we're all set. They're set.
Okay.
Thank everyone for attending tonight.
Great. And like I say, this is being recorded, and tomorrow's session will also be recorded. So we will be sharing those with the broader community as well. So thank you everybody for attending, and I hope everybody has a great night.